Jimbo Paris, and you are listening to The Jimbo Paris Show. All right, how's it going, everyone? This is Jimbo here, and today we've got Judy Ryan. Let's see what she has to say.
Hello. Nice to meet you and to be doing this with you.
Yeah, it's been a privilege. So, can you please give me kind of a brief summary of who you are, what you're about, and what your message is?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm a CEO of my own company. We're in our 20th year. It's called LifeWork Systems. And what I'm really about is creating a world where all people love their lives. And I know that sounds very idealistic. I see you rolling your eyes a little, but there really are a lot of things that people can do to create certain kinds of conditions and conversations where people become psychologically safe, they become emotionally intelligent, they're able to really get along with each other, and they're able to feel like they have ownership of their personal power and that they know how to guide it in a way that isn't frightening to them or anyone else. So that's a little bit about what I do and what I want to cause.
And what do you mean by ownership?
Meaning that people don't take personal responsibility for their life unless they've been taught how to pick that up and hold it. If you want, I can tell you a story that we often use when we're doing a big conference. This is actually a true story, even though we do it at international conferences or to corporations. It's actually a story about an 8th grade student that was in one of the schools we were working with. This one actually was in a school where only one teacher was doing our program. We've done a lot of big school reform where the whole schools are doing our work. But she asked me to come in and sit in on her 8th grade classroom meeting because she knew that her responsibility in this model was to transfer responsibility to the students for their relationships, for their productivity, for their engagement. And so she asked me if I would come and kind of help her with that so she would understand that better. Well, the day that I came in, there was this 8th grade boy who said, I have something I want to put on the agenda. I'm being bullied by another teacher. And what he said, which is so interesting, is that they had a new tool that the school was using called a peace pledge. And what they were supposed to do was put their hands on their hearts and commit to, I pledge to use my words and my actions for peace. And this teacher said to him, and she shook her finger like this and said, if any of you don't do this pledge, I'm going to give you a detention. So he came into this classroom meeting saying, you know, I'm being pushed and bullied to have to do this tool, and that's not right. And so she said to me, Judy, how would I help him transfer responsibility for this? So I said to her, I said, one thing I would do, I asked him, I said, do you want peace in the school? And he said, yes, I do. And I said, do you want peace with the teacher who's bullying you? And he said, yeah, I guess so. And I said, are you willing to start looking at where you're doing war with her? And he said, me? I'm the one being bullied. And I said, are you willing to look? Because you're the one saying you want peace. And he said, yes, I am. And so I said, do you ever say bad things about her behind her back? And he said, well, yeah, I hate her. And I said, okay, hate and gossip. Do you see anything warlike about that? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, do you ever try to go to her and have a conversation with her when things are calm? And he said, no, we're all afraid of her. And I said, well, do you know that fear of another person is attack? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, have you ever had a dog come charging at you and it's all ferocious? If you get afraid of that dog, does that dog get more hostile or less hostile? And he said, more hostile. And I said, you're right. Why? And he said, I don't know. And I said, the reason the dog gets more hostile is when you're afraid of someone or something like a dog, you're actually sending the signal, you're my enemy, and he's going to return the favor. So you being gossiping, hating, and being afraid of this teacher are 3 ways you're doing war. Now, what do you want to do now that you know that? And he said, well, now I want to go to her, but I don't really know how to do it. And I said, well, isn't it great you have 20 classmates and a teacher and even a coach with you today? So what if you just practice with your classmates? And what was really cool about this, and this is what I love about this work, is that some of the other kids said, well, I'll go with you because I've been doing WAR with this teacher too. And I didn't realize I was. And so they all started practicing and worked out how he would go to her, how they would go to her. And what was really interesting is the teacher came to me afterwards and she said, you know what, this has really convicted me to go and work with you in school reform, because that's what we were doing a lot of. She said, because I'm the only one doing this in this school. And yet we have all of these posters around the school building that say, be responsible, be accountable, get along, you know. And she said it's about as crazy as saying math is crucial, reading is essential, and having no math or reading classes. And so she realized everyone in that group wanted to up their game because of one person literally picking up responsibility and actually making a plan for, you know, taking care of business, basically. Does that explain?
That's a very, very interesting story. And the idea that fear is actually an attack is pretty fascinating because it shows kind of karma in a sense, because what you give is what you receive.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that a really interesting thing. And what kind of gave you this high level perspective? Because it seems like you have a lot of technical, well, again, forgive me, but maybe psychology-ish knowledge. I'm not too well versed in this field, but you also seem like just a very wise person as well. How did you cultivate that in yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. I happened to pawn a psychology model back in the mid 80s, and it was the psychology of Alfred Adler. And he was the person that coined the phrase inferiority complex. And what he basically was saying is that all struggles in the world come from a state of unworthiness and feelings of inferiority. And what we don't realize is that most of the ways that we raise children in homes and in schools actually creates more feelings of inferiority complex than most people realize. So in this situation, like, I could have pampered him, I could have rescued him, I could have said, well, why aren't you committed to doing the pledge? And you should be. You know, I could have said I would be proud of you if you did the pledge. Like, we have all these adult things we do to children and to one another as adults that we don't realize actually are coming from our own fearful beliefs. So once I understood that whenever we're behaving in a way that causes inferiority complex, we're actually creating the conditions in which people are going to struggle. And some of that struggle is inside of them, like stress or anxiety or depression. But some of that struggle is between people, like all the isms, all the I'm right, you're wrong, I want to win and I don't care if you lose. All of that is coming from inferiority complex. And once I understood that, I began to, this was a long time ago, decades ago, I began to use this methodology with my family. So by the time my kids were 5, they all knew how to run a family meeting, because we consciously wanted to cultivate in them how to feel empowered, how to feel lovable, which is very different than being loved. Lovable is when someone listens to you and they don't try to fix you or convert you or change you or make you wrong, but you feel received and witnessed by them. We all want to feel connected, and we all want to feel that we have contributions to make. And so when we consciously decided to do that, we learned all these tools and concepts in which to use with our own family that would minimize wherever people are feeling inferiority. And so once I started to do that, not only did that provide a way for me to be a parent that I was proud of, I had 5 kids, it healed some things in my own childhood. And I would have to say my childhood was kind of normal, but even normal is pretty traumatic. And then you add on top of it other kind of abuse, it's really difficult. So I felt like, oh my gosh, this would relieve so much suffering in the world. So at one point I had the vision in my mind of, I want to take this out into the world. And where I first began with it was to go into schools in the early days and work with parents, teachers, administrators, students, and the neighborhood all simultaneously. Because I was this parent doing this, and I didn't have other parents around me that knew what I was doing. I didn't have my kids' school teachers know what I was doing. And I know that this isn't just about schools, because most of our work now is in corporate settings or nonprofit or government. But it's really about how do you create a whole community of people that understand a new way of operating so that everyone's on the same page. Everyone knows how to like put things down like punishment, put things down like rewarding and bribing, and, you know, even saying, I'm disappointed in you. All of those types of things that we don't realize are really harming people. So I don't know that I'm so wise as much as maybe I was wise enough to recognize what was healing for me and to, you know, build my conviction about it. And then I wanted to bring it out to so many people that I created it all on a digital platform so that it could scale out to lots and lots of people.
Well, speaking of what you do for other people, you seem like a person that also tends to do a lot of different sacrifices as well. I think there
Huh.
was, you know, a certain man that you turned down in order to focus more on your goals in life.
I
Or
don't know if I would hold it as sacrifice. I think when we're aligned with our design as a human being, when we're aligned with what we feel the most excited about, it doesn't feel like we're living a life of sacrifice. Now, it's not to say my life is always easy, because what I bring to the world is disruptive, and people don't always like me. You know, when I'm at first glance, like I'm sure that student was like, what? You know, I'm not doing WAR, she's doing WAR, you know, because that's what we do. But honestly, when we do live according to our purpose and our values, and we're aligned with our visions, we really don't work a day in our lives. So that's why for 30 years, really, I still have passion about what I'm doing. I even had one of my kids, when they were still living at home, she said, I wish I had your work ethic. And I said, you do. You stay up all night and you watch video games. She's like, Mom, that's just fun. And I said, it's fun when you're living the life that you want to live.
that's interesting. So are you saying that are you doing this because is this the life that you actually want to live though? Or are you doing
Yes.
this for a much deeper reason? Is this more of a calling, not really an
I think
enjoyment?
it's a calling and an enjoyment, because what I
Okay.
see is I see that the world is in a lot of pain. And I've also seen whole communities that I've been able to impact, and it takes time. And over time, they're happy in their work. They're happy with each other. They have some things that we've all kind of heard about. Like anybody that's in business, they're studying, you know, they're hearing about psychological safety and trauma-informed ways of operating, you know, but most people don't know how to actually implement something so that it is safe and it is emotionally intelligent. And that's the trick is, you know, when George Floyd was killed, some of my own people said, well, we need to go in and fix the police departments. And I said, we don't even operate that way, because our questions aren't why is this happening and who's to blame? Our questions are, what system, if it were put in place, would solve this problem? And then we bring a whole community together to change that system. That is really what systemic change is. And yet most people, they say, we need systemic change, but they usually mean for that group, not for all of us. And they usually don't know what system needs to be dismantled and what system needs to be put in place instead.
And what would you define as systemic change?
Well, our system is based on holding people in a perspective of you are great. And if you're not looking and acting great, it's because you want to be great and you haven't been given the right conditions and conversations in order to become into that greatness that you are. So if you think about things like being an autocrat, like a person that's a boss or a parent that says, you do it or else, right? What you're really believing about a person when you do that is, I don't really trust you. I have to manage you. I have to dominate you. I have to do power over you. If you're dangling a carrot in front of someone saying, look, if you do this, I'll give you that, you're really holding them in your mind as you're basically lazy and selfish if I don't induce your motivation for you. If I say to you, Jimbo, I just really think you're my favorite, you're the best, even that is me doing it from above, as opposed to just saying, I notice you really love doing the show, Jimbo, and that it affects a lot of people and a lot of people follow you. So if I say to you, I'm disappointed in you, or you're, like, I'm proud of you, then I'm still talking, I'm bestowing a judgment. And my belief is that I have more value than you do. That gives me the right to bestow on you. Can you see that? That's why some people, when they're praised, they're like, stop it, because it feels demeaning. And then if I were to say, oh, poor you, you don't have to do that, or let me remind you, let me set an alarm for you, or let me do your test for you. Now I'm also treating you like you aren't capable. So that's really what we are at. The system we're bringing in is, let's not have any of those negative, fearful beliefs about people. Let's hold a belief about them that they are and want to be great. And so not only do we make the priority to bring in everything that person needs to pick up their own tasks, but to feel supported in the process. And that's not, it's not rocket science, but if people don't have never seen it before, or have never heard of it before, they don't know how to do that system.
That's interesting. So this is kind of how my brain is picking up what you're saying. Instead of actually praising people, we need to teach people how to praise themselves.
I would say maybe. I mean, really, what I just described for you are the 4 extrinsic motivators. So if I'm praising you, I'm trying to puppet string you, right?
Yeah.
So what are the internal motivations? It might be internal praise, but what it's really, and that could fall into one of those categories, because what's more important is, instead of using those extrinsic motivators, what if we help people to see and make sure that they're choosing what's meaningful to them, and that what they're doing, that they can connect to what's meaningful about it. Like, I remember one time I was on stage talking about this, and this woman said, but I do this really menial job. And her boss was there, and he said, yeah, but because you do that job, this many hundreds of people get new homes every year. Like, she just needed to draw the connection between her menial job had meaningfulness. And so one intrinsic motivator is making sure people are connecting to what's meaningful to them and living aligned with that. Another is to make sure that people have choices. That's why when my kids were little, by the time they were between 5 and 11, the first 4, they knew, they had been trained in how to go to the grocery store with hundreds of dollars. Now, nowadays, I'd probably be given a ticket or put in jail or something, but I would drop them off and they were trained. And they would go through the store and do the shopping, and they'd get to the end and they'd have the hundreds of dollars, a couple $100s. And the checkout people would say, where are your parents? Like, you have a lot of money and you guys are handling all this? And they would say, well, yeah, because we've been trained, and he's got the clicker and she's got the list, and we know to stand, go single file. But our whole purpose was to make sure that we were creating it, that they felt that they had choices and that they had power. And if you don't give people choices and power, they're going to be always in reaction to someone. And then the third intrinsic motivator is just helping people be competent at things. And some of those things need to be competent at how to manage relationships, because most of us become competent in reading and writing. Some people do, some people don't, but not all of us are even taught how to be good communicators or how to manage. Like in that case of that 8th grader, he was asked to manage a relationship with an authority figure. That's a hard thing. And he chose for it. And so did some of his own co-students. And then the 4th intrinsic motivator kind of might be what you're talking about when you say praise yourself. It's called the sense of progress. So a lot of times in our lives, we succeed at something and then we don't acknowledge it and we don't get the juice out of it. I remember one time we won a $300,000 school reform project, a grant, and we're not even nonprofit. The school district wanted it for us and they let us write it. And it was just an amazing fulfillment of a vision. And I told our team, I had even made a vision board that said, hey, everybody, listen up. I got something big to say, But when I said it, I was like jumping into the work of it. And they said, whoa, can't we just have a party and celebrate this, And we fail to do that sometimes. I'm real guilty of that one. So that, if anything, that's kind of praising ourselves, but I would say it's more like encouragement and celebration, acknowledgement and recognition, which is encouragement is very different from praise. I can encourage you even if you fail at something. I can say, I really saw you put good effort into this, and I can see you put your heart and soul into this. But I can't say I'm proud of you if you failed, but I can say I noticed that you really gave it your all, or that this really matters to you, and that you had a lot of, courage, or thank you for doing this.
Okay. So I understood a lot of that. That was quite interesting. So I think you mentioned one point called competency, right?
Yes.
Okay, so here's one. How did you apply competency to when you were working in that consulting firm?
I'm not sure which consulting firm are you talking about?
So I think in your past history, you've worked in a lot of different consulting firms, right?
Yes, I have.
Did you ever apply any of those? What I'm trying to say is, did you ever apply any of those skills in the consulting firm? I just want to understand.
Yeah, just so you know, most of the time we're working in actual businesses that are not necessarily consulting firms. Sometimes we are. Like, our partners are often consultants that want to become, they want to add to their consultancy how to oversee projects that bringing our culture system in, because they know that it'll just enhance what they're doing as consultants. But as far as competency, it's important that everybody learn all of the tools we have, and the intrinsic motivators are just one tool. And out of that 4 intrinsic motivators, competency is one skill. Now, if you think about most companies, let's say you're hired to bake bread in a bakery. People are going to be more focused on your competency to do that skill, but they're not going to necessarily focus on the first 2 motivators. Do you find meaningfulness in being here? Why is it that you want to work here? What makes you happy about working here? What choices do you want about your schedule, or about what you do and how you do it? And what role do you want to grow into? So there's your meaningfulness and your choices. Most organizations focus on the competency, but they skip over the most important ones, which are purpose and values and meaning and passion and some of those things. I hope that answers what you're asking me.
You just said something very interesting to me there. You said more important. So I think I was under the impression that all these different things were equally important. But what are the most important ones you think?
With the intrinsic motivators, I say that they're important in the order that they're given. So the very first thing is sense of meaningfulness. Even when we lead clients and we lead our own company, we always start with our purpose. And in our world, that means, what are we committed to causing? Not what are we doing, but what are we committed to causing? So when you're doing a job, when you're raising a child, you want them to understand what is meaningful about what you're doing. If they don't connect those dots, they just trudge through as though they're a victim. And that's the reason we have so many people with victim consciousness, to be honest with you. So to me, if you don't cover a sense of meaningfulness, then you can't go to choice and competency and progress in a way that's truly meaningful, that's truly everything is holistic, and it's going to work and it's going to sustain. You can't do that without sense of meaningfulness. It's the most important thing to hold intention. And we can't hold intention if we're cynical about something, or we don't believe in it, or we don't get the relevance of it.
So you mentioned a big one too, intrinsic values. I think a lot of times in the internet, we talk about things like extrinsic motivation from rewards, external things. I don't think everyone here knows, and I personally don't know the exact definition, but what's the difference between something intrinsic motivating versus extrinsic?
So here's the difference. When somebody is extrinsically motivating us, it's as though they're holding the puppet strings. It's their effort that is trying to motivate the behavior. And it works it quote unquote works. I say that because if I held a gun to your head, or I said, look, if you don't do this, I'm going to fire you, I'd probably get you to do what I wanted, right? And I might even be able to give you a really good incentive or bonus or reward and get you to do what I want you to do. And the same with the judgment, and the same with the enabling, and all of those things can quote unquote work. That's why people are so hooked on them. But the reality is all of them cost. And so when you do extrinsic motivation, what you automatically do is you decrease the internal motivation within the person. So for example, I'll tell you a funny little story. There was this old man, he lived next to a middle school. These kids would come by after school and they would yell up at him. He was on the second floor and they'd say, "Hey, you stinky old goat, you old fart," they were just horrible to him. And he said, "You know what? You guys are doing a great job. If you all keep it up, I'm going to come down and give you all $1." And they're like, "What?" So sure enough, to his surprise, he comes down and he gives them all $1. And he goes like, "Oh my God, you guys did great. Now I'm out of dollars, but if you come back tomorrow, I'll give you all a quarter. I have a little roll of quarters." And they're like, "Okay, it's not as good, but we'll come back." So the next day they come back and they're whooping it up and they even brought a couple friends, and he comes down and he goes, "Oh my gosh, great job. I am so proud of you." And he gives them all a quarter and he says, "Now I'm out of quarters, but if you all come back tomorrow, I'll give you all a penny." And they said, "A penny, forget it." And they never came back and bothered him again. And the reason that's kind of funny and also kind of wise is he knew that in the beginning, they were intrinsically loving, heckling him. Like that was where they were getting their joy. That was meaningful to them. And as soon as he diverted them to giving a darn about money and his reward, he could wean them off of that, and their own original motivation was gone. That's why they never came back again. It wasn't even fun to them anymore. And that's what happens when we use rewards, but most people don't know that. They just see that it pulled the puppet string one day and it seemed to work, but they don't realize it's costing. So intrinsic motivation is helping a person to discover within themselves. Like when I told you the story about the 8th grader, when I said, "Do you want peace?" Do you see that's the first step? Asking him, "Do you want peace?" Because if he didn't want peace, why would I work double time to help him? Okay, now that you want peace, do you want peace with the teacher who's bullying you? And I use those words. And he said, yes. That was him saying in his own heart and outwardly, "I intend that. That's meaningful to me." So right there, I was establishing him deciding what was meaningful to him. And then I said, "Okay, are you willing to look at where you're doing war?" Again, I'm giving him choices all the way through. It's questions, even to the point of, "Okay, now that you see all these ways you're doing war, what will you do now?" So choice, that's an intrinsic motivator. We don't often give that to people. That's why in our projects, we have people lead groups themselves. Just like when my kids were 5, by the time they were 5, they could run a family meeting because we wanted them to know how to both lead and follow, even when they were that little. And that's often missing in all kinds of places in the world. People just say, I don't have that title. I don't know how to do that. That's not my job. And they don't jump in when maybe they're the best person to do it, I hope I answered your question about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic, because it's super important.
It's very important because I think now that you say it, most people run off extrinsic motivation.
They do.
And
they do.
Yeah, and from what I'm getting from that story you told me, extrinsic motivation is not as sustainable as something intrinsic, right?
Right. We even say it this way: when a person is in reaction to someone else, they're either doing one of two things. They're either resentfully complying because they feel as if they have no personal power or personal control. And then when they go down that lane, they don't feel responsible for their relationships, their tasks, a whole bunch of things. And their behavior shows up like they're a victim. So that's one possible response when we believe someone else is pulling the strings. Another one is to go into what's kind of a pseudo power. And when we do that, we go into rebelling and resisting. And then we also don't take responsibility for our tasks, our relationships, and our outcomes. We just function as almost like a mean-spirited, "No, I won't, you can't make me." It's almost a revenge kind of dynamic. Like I'll tell you, when I was dating a man years ago, and he wasn't wearing his safety belt, and I just happened to ask him, "Why don't you wear your safety belt?" And his response was, "I'm not letting the government control me." And I said, "The government's not even in the car with us." But he was a divorcee that had children, and he didn't even care if he might go through the windshield and hurt himself or what it looked like to me, because it wasn't attractive that he was in that reactive. No one's going to control me, you know, but he didn't even know he was doing it. That's the thing that's more true than not for most people. So when people are operating from extrinsic motivation, they don't even know that they're walking around most of the time as a victim or as a rebel. And they haven't even considered that there's something alternative to that. I remember one guy in one of my classes said, oh my God, I've been living over on that side of the chart the whole time. How do I get out of that? You know, because it was like a revelation.
And you just mentioned something bigger, victim versus rebel. But
No, it's victim and rebel. Those are both on the both on the negative side of what we call the personal responsibility chart. When a person is not extrinsically motivated, they're on this side of this chart. And I know you can't visually see it, but when they're extrinsically motivated, it's called other directed. They don't even feel that they're connected to their decisions. They believe others. They believe others are controlling them. Even if it, like that guy was like, I'm not letting the government control me. Can you see, like, that was unconscious in him, but he believed he had no control over even his own choices. So when a person is not on that side, they're in what's called self-directed. And when they're in self-directed, they're always asking, okay, I have this decision in front of me. What am I feeling? What do I want? If I want this, what are both the positive and negative consequences of it? And I have options because I'm not reacting. And I might say, maybe I want to say yes to this, or maybe I want to say no to this, or maybe I want a third option. Like one time my sister, she called me up and she goes, okay, I'm just conscious enough to know that I might be part of the problem, but I don't know what's going on. So will you help me? And I said, okay, what's going on? She said, I just had an argument with my mother-in-law and she's just so controlling. Like that's what she started with. And I said, well, what's happening? And she goes, well, you know, every year we take turns doing Thanksgiving. And this year I decided to do Thanksgiving. And all I did was ask my mother-in-law, when do you guys plan to leave that day? And she got all bent out of shape about it. Like, she's such a control freak. Like, this is what she's telling me. So I asked my sister, I said, did you want to do Thanksgiving? And she said, well, I hadn't done it in a long time. I really thought I should. Now, what that told me was there was a barrier. Like, she hadn't cleared all the barriers to really say yes. So she was actually in both rebel and resentful compliance. And I said, okay, just for a second, I want you to pretend that you haven't already made the decision. I want you to go back to the place of making the decision. And I want you to sit with the question, do I really want to do Thanksgiving? And then she paused a second and then she said, you know what? I really do want to do Thanksgiving. She said, but I realized I don't want to miss out on the game night we always do at your house on Thanksgiving. Because it was kind of a tradition, like everybody would come over around 7 and we'd eat pie again and we'd play charades and all that, you know. And in the back of her mind, that was there, but she hadn't even thought it out to realize, because what she could have done is she could have said to her family on her husband's side, you know, you guys, I really want to do Thanksgiving, but I just want to make sure you guys are okay with me taking off to go over to my sister's at 7. And if you guys are all good with that, I just don't want to miss that. You know, I'm happy to do it. Now, can you see how she would have been in alignment with her decision? But because she hadn't listened to herself and considered all the effects of what she was deciding, she went into that feeling of, I have no control over my life. So I'm going to resentfully do this. And I'm going to be a little rebellious and revengeful about it, even though I'm completely blind to the fact that I'm doing that. Does that kind of clear what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm just breaking it down in my head in a way I can understand. So
yeah, I saw you smiling a few times. So I thought.
It's very interesting, but how I pick it up, it's a matter of sort of, you know, it's about being authentic with yourself. How I see it, it's about being authentic with yourself and learning to say no.
Well, I would say the guy that said, I'm not letting the government control me, believed he was authentic, but what he was.
I wasn't talking about that.
No, I know, but I'm saying that for the distinction, because what I would say even more than being authentic, it's being conscious, it's being awake. Because if you're not awake, you're not stopping long enough to say, what am I feeling about this? And what do I want? And that's all I did with my sister. When I brought her back around to that question and I told her, just take a breath and consider what you really feel, she had the awareness that, oh, I really do want to do Thanksgiving. I just don't want to do it if it means I have to miss this thing later. So now she could have had a conversation that would have been about all of that. And that's called a third option. Like she didn't want to say no. She didn't want to say yes without having the caveat, right? But she didn't even know the caveat was there because she did not wake up to the question.
Okay, I get it now, because she didn't technically say no. She was saying, let them come over, but then I'm going to go.
No, she didn't even have that in her consciousness until I asked her the question. Do you will you slow down and ask yourself, do you really want to do Thanksgiving? And when she paused and she was just talking to me, she goes, you know what I just realized? I do want to do it, but I don't want to miss out on game night. And I go, well, can you see, you could have said all that to your relatives when the decision was being made. You could have said, hey, you guys, if you're okay with either, just hanging out while I go, I'm happy to do it. If they would have said, no, we don't want to do it that way, then she would have said, then maybe one of you guys want to host it, right? Because in every moment she would be checking in with herself. Well, what do I feel now? What do I want now? And when people don't do that, they feel as though their whole life is being dominated by someone or something else, even if that authority figure is in their head from childhood.
Okay, I think I'm understanding that a little bit better now. So, oh yeah, I hear a little buzzing. It's okay, we'll let that out. So, I think I'm slowly beginning to understand this a bit more. So, I think, could we do one more example? This way I perfectly got it down. All right.
Yeah. What kind of example are you asking for? So I make sure I give you, like, the difference between a person who's accountable and a person who's a victim and rebel.
Yeah, you showed me two instances. So it was that one person in the car. I understood. So what you were saying, he technically wasn't aware, but he felt out of control. That was the big thing. He didn't feel out of.
Yeah, when you're other directed, you just have this sort of core thing going on that says, I have to do it, I should do it, I ought to do it, it's expected of me. And one reaction is to resentfully do it, and you're going to do it at about a C-. That's where my sister was headed. And then there's a part of you that's going to be mean-spirited about it. Like, she was double dipping. She was on both sides of that. She was both a little rebellious, and that's why it was easy for her to blame her mother-in-law and project onto her mother-in-law that she was all controlling and everything. So that's the really critical thing to know, is when we're doing something out of a should, a have to, an ought to, I need to, or I can't do anything differently, we're really believing we have no power. That's a mindset right there.
Okay, so she felt like she had to do that. She felt like she was being controlled, so she was lashing out. Okay.
Yeah, well, here's where it showed up. When I said, did you want to do Thanksgiving? She said, the first thing she said to me was, well, I haven't done it in a while. I felt like I should. Do you see how that was a huge clue to me? That she had made the decision out of a I should. And that's what I took her back to. I said, okay, just pretend for a moment you haven't said I should or yes. What do you really feel? Oh, I realize I only want to do it if I can also get this other thing in on that day. Now she wouldn't have been coming from I should, but she immediately went to this place of smallness, like, well, I should take my turn. I'm not a good person if I don't follow the fairness rules. Like, all those things are programmed into us. Even the guy that was saying, I'm not letting the government control me. I don't know who programmed that into him. It might have been his father saying that. It might have been him just having all kinds of messages about the government. It might have been, our authority figures. Who knows? But what you come to do in my work is you come to recognize when a person's at choice or when they're in that other directed mindset. So I'll give you an example. So if I were your boss and I said to you, hey, Jimbo, I want you to go to this event and I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Are you willing? And you were to say to me, yeah, I guess. What would I be hearing in your voice? Are you 100% bought in?
Not really. I think I'm just telling myself I have to because you're my boss.
Right. But I would be hearing it if I'm listening for it. So I might say to you, Jimbo, what's the barrier? I can hear a barrier. And you might say, well, I don't really know if I have time because I have this other project I have to do. And I'd say, okay, then let's talk about that. Do you see how it's not about making, like, my sister wasn't wrong if she had said no or yes to Thanksgiving, but the reality is she actually had a third option that she wanted, which was yes with this caveat, right? So if you're the boss or you're the person that is in the position, you want to be able to recognize when somebody's really saying a yes that's coming from a solid, accountable self, or somebody that's saying a no that's not coming from rebellion. Because even saying I'm not going to wear a safety belt is not a place of power. It's a place of weakness when you're doing it in reaction. So part of it is just training yourself to recognize the words people use, the energy they have. Oh, okay, Judy, I'll do it. You know, that should be a huge clue that the person is not aligned with it.
All right. So that's pretty interesting. So what simple tips can you give to me or anyone else listening here on how to be more in alignment and to kind of begin getting into the more, I believe from what I've been hearing from you, the intrinsic side of things?
Okay. I would answer that a couple of ways. One way, it's the highest priority of our work is for every person. And I'm telling you, when we do the 12-month process with people, this is the month that they push back. And it's so interesting to me because it's where we help them define their own purpose, their own values, their own visions, their own goals, their own roles, and their own procedures, all of that. They balk at it. They're like, why do we need to do this? What does this have to do with work? And this is stupid. You know, like they're like that. Purpose is just who we are when we're at our best. So for me, I mean, I have a process to help people get there, but for me, I'm at my best. When I'm at my best, I'm causing people to love their lives. I'm loving my life, other people are loving their lives, and I'm part of helping that happen. And I know that from the process I went through. So my day, if I get angry and reactive and so on, and I'm ready to write a nasty email or write a quick text or something, I've trained myself to say, now, is this aligned with who you want to be right now? Is this aligned with your mission to create a world where all people love their lives? And that informs me. So alignment for me begins with purpose, not even values. Values are in support of a purpose. So like one of my values is to treat you as though you're one of my best friends, to over communicate with you. If you want more information, I'll give you more information, you know, and it's a number of things like that. Unconditional love of people, seeing the good in people, lifelong learning. Those are the kinds of things that keep me loving my life. The other way people can align is when they're asked to make a decision, pay attention to how they feel in their body. Oh gosh, I'm sitting here thinking I should do Thanksgiving. That doesn't feel good in the body. The minute you go, okay, slow down, let's take 1 or 2 breaths. The likelihood is, and to train yourself, what am I feeling and what do I want? And sometimes that's layers deep. Sometimes it's very quick. That would prevent people from saying yes to things mindlessly and help them to make sure that they're fully accountable before they're saying yes, no, or anything else. And it is a discipline. It's something that people aren't even used to. I've met 40 and 50-year-olds that have said to me, I've never asked myself, what am I feeling and what do I want? Nobody ever told them it was okay. Nobody ever taught them to do it on a, you know, as a discipline. So yeah, hopefully those tips will help.
Excellent, excellent. And so you also appeared on the Fox 2 TV show about 9 years ago. What types of information did you convey there? And getting on a platform that...
Well, we actually ended up getting a whole bunch of TV interviews after that because one TV station sees that and then another one wants you to get on there. It's kind of fun. So that was all about, I was actually presenting at Working Women's Survival Show, which is a big conference in St. Louis. And it was being sponsored in part by Fox 2 News. And they saw that my topic was called Why We Gossip and What to Do Instead. And so they wanted to interview me on that subject. And so I went on that TV station because it's one of a bunch of tools that we have. But we have a tool called the Mind Trust, and we have a tool called Healthy Venting. And really, people don't realize how complex it is why we gossip. Like, we gossip for really good reasons. We gossip because we want to feel empowered. We want to feel lovable. We want to feel connected. We want to feel contributing. And gossip is a way we think that's happening. And so it's not easy to, it's like if you're addicted to drugs, it's not easy to put them down. You have to be able to find a better way to get those needs met. So it's not as simple as just taking a tool and applying it. Even the tool we give them is not an easy tool. And the healthy venting tool is not an easy tool. But I just wrote an article, Jimbo. It was called "A Fool with a Tool is Still a Fool." Because when you have a tool, if you haven't changed your mindset, you're just going through the motions, and eventually you're going to default to your old mindset, and your behavior is going to follow right behind it. I don't know if you have time for a story, but I can give you a story about it if you want.
Sure, let's do one more story, but then I also want to show off your website too.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'd appreciate that. Okay. So Jimbo, this tool, one of the tools for gossip is called the mind trust. And this is what it would look like if I was doing it to you, and you would be then doing it back if you wanted to. So it would go like this: Jimbo, I commit to you that I won't say anything bad about you behind your back. I also commit to you that if I have a problem with you, I will come to you with the problem and work it out with you. And I also commit, if someone comes over to me and starts to say something bad about you, that I'm going to respectfully stop them, and I'm going to offer them healthy venting maybe, but I'm definitely not going to let them say bad things about you to me. In fact, what I'm going to do, and this is the fourth commitment, I'm going to commit to try to get them to go to you directly so that they don't hold on to that grudge or they don't take it to other people. Now that's a hard commitment, because what if I'm your boss and you're telling me I'm going to come directly to you if I have a problem, but you're terrified of being fired? You see how hard that tool could be. Well, we had a group of 52 leaders go through what's called a leader review. It's they don't do a deep dive like we do in our projects. They just learn all the concepts and tools without any like application or practice or mentoring or anything. And there were these 10 leaders out of this group that had all done this mind trust that I just did with you. And one day she calls me and she says to me, oh my gosh, we're having a problem in this one area where these 8 people work, and their boss is named John. I'm just making this up. And his boss is named Jim. And this person's name is Mary. And she said, yeah, 2 of the people from that group came to me and tattled on John that he had said something bad about me during the meeting. And so I said to Mary, did you say to those 2 people, did you go to John and tell him how you felt about it? And she goes, no. And I go, isn't that what the mind trust would tell you to tell them to do? She goes, yeah. And I go, did you ask them if they stopped the person from saying the things about you? Because isn't that their commitment to you? She goes, Judy, I can't believe it. None of us remembered any of it. I even went to his boss, who was at the meeting, who did not stop this person either. And I was tattling on this guy, wanting him to go and censure him. Like, she goes, what happened to all of us? And I said, the only thing that happened to you is you learned a tool, but you didn't really realize what it entails to actually live it. So in the beginning, getting a tool is not enough. You have to remember and practice it and talk about it and understand it and look at where you have barriers around it, so that when the day comes that you really live it, it's become part of the normalcy of the organization, and you become courageous in it. And it can't be done if you don't have all the psychological safety around you that makes it possible for you to go directly to people and talk to them. Some people can't do that with a problem because they don't know how to communicate about a frustration or any kind of situation that feels uncomfortable. So that's what I mean when I say they were all fools with a tool, but they're not really fools. They're just less practiced. And they didn't realize it until this incident, like, oh my gosh, how come we didn't see that the mind trust went out the window? And that's why it's really important that people don't just cling on to a tool, because if you don't change your mind, you just default.
Okay. You just default.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's another interesting one. So do you think a lot of times these HR sessions and these HR seminars that people have, these icebreakers, they're just dishing out tools. We may not be using the tools properly. So for example, I could see with, maybe icebreakers, a lot of times people absolutely hate icebreakers. So even though we may be using these specific tools to maybe build a deeper connection with other people, we may not be using these tools properly. We may just be rushing it just so that we could get out in time.
Well, I would say most people, when they do an icebreaker, it is usually a pleasant experience and people do feel some connection. But here's the problem with it. If you don't have a foundational understanding about everyone taking for the good and the bad, you could have the best icebreaker in the world, but if somebody goes behind their back and gossips or does something else that's very destructive, now you just blew all the goodness from the icebreaker. So it's not that the tools or icebreakers are bad. It's just that if you don't have a commitment to a deeper system approach and all of the parts of that, you won't really know how to overcome, you won't know how to extend the good feeling that you would get in an icebreaker so that it's a normal everyday way of operating.
So it's more so about kind of understanding the why behind the tool.
It's understanding the why, and also understanding how, like with the gossip example, wow, we have good reasons why we've been gossiping. We need to find a better way to get those needs met so that we don't need to use gossip as the way to get those jollies, if you will, right? And so sometimes it's even taking that first step and saying, you know what, it's understandable that you would gossip because it does make you feel powerful, even though it's not real power. And it does make you feel more connected to the person you're gossiping with. And it may even make you feel more lovable because you're tearing someone else down, which momentarily might make you feel like you're more superior or something. Or it might make you feel that you're offering something to the group because you're bringing that juicy gossip. Those are very heady feelings. And if we don't realize that those are associated with why we gossip, or sometimes it's even just the knowing that I need to be able to vent. You do need to be able to vent, but most people do gossip instead of healthy venting. So it's mindset plus tools. And if people just go for tools and they don't want to bother with the mindset, it's really not going to change anything.
Right. Yeah. So technical team, let's go to your website quickly because we don't want to be hitting the 1 hour mark too fast here. But again, great answer. Great answer. All right, great. So this is her website. We expand human potential to maximize life and work performance. All right.
Yep.
And this human potential is the intrinsic kind of values you try and...
It's even beyond intrinsic motivation is all about our motivation. But
Right.
But who we all have our own unique callings in the world. And people don't often get the encouragement to figure out those callings or to appreciate and recognize who they are. And so human potential is so much bigger than any one component part. It's our motivation. It's our engagement with life. It's our relationships. It's our relationships with ourselves. It's how well we take care of our bodies. You know, it's just almost anything you could imagine, how innovative we are. So expanding human potential means that we have the conditions and conversations that allow us to expand into the fullness of who we are. And most people have never been given those conditions and conversations. We used to have, our company name used to be called Expanding Human Potential. And now we call it LifeWork Systems because we want people to know that you need a system that you can rely on. And the kind of system that we've been relying on in homes and schools and workplaces is not necessarily a healthy system. So we come in and explain what is a healthy system, and then we help them to start living it. And then they own it, meaning that they start taking charge of how it's going to be, you know, how they're going to hire new people, how they're going to onboard them. So they have a system that they can now lean on. And they can say, Judy, you know, we need some more online training modules. We just hired 5 new people, but they have their own internal subject matter experts on the culture because they've already paid their dues and they understand it. And they don't have to rely on our company to keep it going. They just needed us to get it started.
And what's this free exploration strategy session?
Well, that generally will take people to our survey, which then gives them a free consult. And the survey is very, very powerful because it asks questions of people that help them to look at things that maybe they never even thought of. Like the very first question is, do we have a written culture plan? And most people are like, I didn't even know I was supposed to have one of those. So part of what happens when they fill out this survey on culture wellness, it tells them what do they have in place and what don't they have in place. It gives them a huge list of challenges and they get to see how many of those challenges they're going through. For some people, maybe out of 29 challenges, they've got 22. And that already starts convicting them. It's like if you went to the doctor and you said, oh my gosh, not only do I have cholesterol problems, I have fatty liver and I have diabetes. The more you know, sometimes the more it teaches you to take, like, I got to do something about this. So there's a lot of organizations that they're doing a whole bunch of trends all at the same time. And they have workforce behaviors that they've never really examined closely and workforce practices. So this is a free survey that gives us a lot of information to give back to them in a priority format. So even if they never do anything with us, go ahead.
Yeah, don't mean to interrupt, but is this survey a lot like some sort of a personality test in a way?
No, we do have one of those because that's one of the surveys we do inside of our projects. This is more about an organization looking, not only the executive looking, the main executives, but the management staff, the frontline staff. They have a smaller survey that just asks. So if you were a person in management in a company and you took this survey and you clicked on management, all you would do is go to a list of management complaints or challenges. And you would be checking off which ones you feel are happening in the company. And then you would pick the top 3. So that if you're the CEO and we give you the CEO, the report, it'll have all of the workplace culture wellness scores, but it'll also say these are the top 3 challenges your managers were thinking were going on here. This is the top 3 challenges of your frontline staff that are non-management staff. And these are the human behaviors that all of them prioritizes as the top 3. So that gives the executive some information about everyone in their company. And all of this is free. But the most important thing we're giving that executive is a scorecard for this is what your culture wellness is. And here are the first 2 areas that you need to look at first. And here are all the kinds of questions you should be asking yourself because of these scores. And they can take that and do whatever they want with it because it doesn't require we have to work with them for them to get the value.
So specifically, what types of what does someone get out of this survey? Is this survey sort of how should I put it, the beginner kind of preliminary thing before you kind of dive into the problems we solve?
It's one door in for us. Some people don't want to do a survey, so they would never take a survey. But when people do a survey, in this case, this particular survey, which is free, even if it's only done by one person, it'd be like if you said, hey, I'm going to go and get my blood drawn and I'm going to get a bunch of tests done. And all of a sudden you realized a bunch of stuff about yourself. Some people never go and get a blood test done. But if you were a person that wanted to know, I want to know what's going on in my body, that's what this is for a person that wants to know what's going on in their culture, because they might not even know how to assess it themselves. And so most people that take this survey, they have a lot of ahas. They're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. Oh my gosh, we're not doing this or that, or we're not doing mentoring with our people, or we're not doing temperament assessments, or we're not helping them be both leaders and followers. There's questions like that on there. And it just kind of wakes them up. And then when we sit down with them, we can have a much richer conversation because it's not just how are you, it's, hey, let me go over your results with you.
Okay. So you go over the results with them. So after someone clicks this button, what is the next step on this website? What's the next place people should go? Because I kind of want to create a roadmap to how people should navigate your website. So do I click that first, and then do I go to what else do I go to?
Well, here's the thing we're working on right now, Jimbo. We have, like, if you go under About Us and go to Articles.
All right, yeah.
We have about 250 articles in there. And most of them are written by myself because I wrote 2 columns. But then we have some industry articles. That's the one I was telling you about. A fool with a tool is still a fool. So what we're doing right now is we're rebuilding our website so that when a person goes to a subject on redirecting negative behavior, for example, which is one of the categories shown on this page. Right now, what we don't have is we don't have the TV interview on redirecting. We have all of it. We don't have it connected together. So our new website is going to have, if you like this article on redirect, you might like these 4. You might like this television interview. You might like this podcast. You might like this testimonial about redirect. You might like this course. And what that does for us is it creates Google being able to show people that we are thought leaders in certain aspects. And so we're in the process of building all of our content out into a central place so that we can make all of those connections. So that if somebody goes on our website and they read one article and they say, I really like that article, and off to the side it says, if you like this one, you might like this one, or you might like this video. And they stay on our website for an hour because there's so much that they are getting from what they're doing. That's really what our next step is on this site, because we have about 500 videos on YouTube. We've got all these articles, we have podcasts, we have interviews, and like this interview with you, I want to be able to, it's going to be on our new website. It'll be pulled in through an intermediary tool so that people can just find it on my site or your site.
Excellent. And so when we go into these articles, this is essentially a blog page, or your definition of a blog page.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, they're being published in the St. Louis Small Business Monthly. They were being published in the women's
Yeah.
journals around the country. The Women's Journal just recently closed down, but we still write every month for the St. Louis Small Business Monthly. And I've been doing that since 2005, these 2 columns. So really, people like content in different formats. And so what we're doing is we're working to make create a web around certain topics that we specialize in.
So all of these articles fall into your specialty.
Yes, all of these articles, except for
That's
there's one category off to the side that's called industry articles. And what we did with those, if you want to go up and look on the side panel where it says all those categories, see where it says industry articles? If you click that, there's 15, I think, or 16, whatever it is. Those are articles written by other people. Those are articles written by like Forbes or Inc., or like this one is Google. And what we're doing in those articles is we're putting them in with the link, but we're also putting them in as a PDF that we're highlighting parts of those articles, because we want people to see, hey, this is a trend going on in the world, and this is the kind of culture that trend is saying you need, and connecting the dots for people. Oh, if you're doing digital transformation, you probably should have this kind of culture. If you're doing diversity and inclusion, you should have this kind of culture. So these are all ways that we can help people to see this isn't just our thought leadership. This is where the evolution of culture is heading. And these are other thought leaders that are writing about it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So even if these are different thought leaders, are they still in line with your specialty, or are you saying no, they're not?
Yeah, if you even opened one of those, like go down to the one that's called the agile culture. I'll tell you when you get to it. It's like a gray page with red on it. A little further down. It's probably at the bottom. Yeah, that's it right there. So click on that. Click on that and you'll see another layer in. Now, if you go down just a little bit, see where it says click here to read the article. Yeah, right there on that second paragraph, first words, where it says click here.
It's, right there. Click here.
Yep.
I think the technical team disconnected there by mistake, but it's all right.
So what you would have seen, maybe it's coming back. Now, if you can scroll down, this is the actual PDF of the article. Somebody could go out online and see this whole thing. But what we've done is we've pulled this article in, and and I believe this is the one. If this is the one on our site, keep going down a little bit more. Yeah, see how we have highlighter? What we're doing with that article is we're highlighting where people need to realize that to have an agile, a successful agile transformation, which is a really big deal, Jimbo. I don't know if you know what that is. It was so agile is kind of like the word agile. Agile is like an agile monkey on the monkey bars, right? It would be somebody with lots of ability to pivot. Well, what happened was in software engineering, they knew that the world was becoming more technologically complex. And in order to create software systems, they had to come up with more modern versions of how to create software. And to do it in a way that can be done like simultaneously, so that if I build a little part of a system, I can give it to you to look at right away, and then you can tell me if I'm doing it right or not. And that's that whole way of managing the complexity in software engineering is called agile. And now some businesses are applying those principles to their whole business, so that if a pandemic hits, they can pivot quickly. That's kind of the purpose of the word agile. So in this type of a transformation, what happens is people, they don't realize how important it is for people to trust each other, be confident with each other, know how to handle their frustrations, and be able to jump in when it's needed and jump out when it's not. Like, be the leader and be the follower real flexibly. If they don't understand that, they can't have a successful agile transformation. So about 96% of agile transformations today are not successful. And it's this culture component. So this is an example of taking an industry giant who's saying the same thing we are, only we're pointing out, hey, look at this industry giant, gets it, that agile is not always agile if you don't get the culture right. That's what the whole title is at the top, when agile isn't so agile. And that's what we're doing with these industry articles. We're trying to get people to connect the dots between, okay, you're doing this big trend, you better not leave out culture. And that's how we show it on the page.
So this business or this philosophy,
this is written by a very big company, and so it aligns us with other big thought leaders who are doing different trends. And this just happens to be on agile, which is a trend, but there might be somebody that's talking about digital transformation, or there's another article on resilience, or there's another article on what is a teal organization. And those are all things we're doing, but showing where we're merging with the trends of today. That you cannot separate the trends that are beginning to come into being apart from the human systems. Because the human systems,
should go to you, not agile.
You should come to us. 100%, Jimbo. You got that right.
Right. Excellent. So this has been a great interview. Can you kind of, do you have any other final words you'd like to say to the audience?
Gosh, I would just like to say to you, Jimbo, and maybe it's for the audience too, I appreciate your calm, open demeanor. It's very calming. It's very peaceful. And I appreciate it because I'm kind of a hot-wired person. I always say I'm a Northeast coast kind of personality stuck in a Midwest city. So I like to talk fast and move fast. And it's just been really nice to be with you, not rushing me and not stopping me. And I love that about you. So hopefully the audience will realize it's nice to have somebody around you to be peaceful.
Thanks again. And also remember to buy Alison Cosgrove's book. She's a great author, great influencer, and she has a lot of great points to bring into your life too. Thanks again, Judy Ryan.
Thank you for having me, Jimbo. I really appreciate it.
All right. I'm Jimbo Paris. This is the Jimbo Paris Show. Thank you for listening to the Jimbo Paris Show.